Here we are again today. We're going to talk about inventory obsolescence and costing parts managers and dealerships millions. And this is about more of the financial impact of obsolescence. So what is the financial impact of obsolescence, and what does it have on dealerships? And I think there's two ways to look at it, right? From a dealer's perspective and a parts manager's perspective. That I'm going to let you lead in on that.
Very true. There's partsies versus dealeries. And again, it's that investment perspective. Again, when you have obsolescence, any frozen capital out there is basically dead wood. When industry measurements at dealerships are done by days supply or turns of an inventory, when you sit and take the idle inventory areas, which would be excess inventory or forced stock or obsolescence, subtract those out of an inventory and just look at your productive inventory and divide that out, you'll find out, and we've even had manufacturers to talk about this, that your turns are incredible. And it's Econ 101 is what I call it. And that is 20% of your inventory basically generates probably 85, 90% of your gross. Okay? So when you think about that, and you think about ASR programs such as RIM and Arrow and PartsEdge and whatnot, the manufacturers tend to guarantee what sells, but it also helps them control their supply chain and their velocity. That's why they came up with these programs. Anybody can guarantee what sells. The tough thing is trying to control what doesn't sell. People have always asked me, what's a great percentage of my inventory? What would be the perfect percentage to have guaranteed versus non-guaranteed? Reality is, somewhere between 40 and 60%, but the brass ring would be, 100% of your inventory was guaranteed. And that's just never going to happen in most dealerships. And with that being said, that's where most of the focus with dealerships this day and age are with their non-guaranteed inventory. And it's really become a boat anchor. It's grown by about 10 to 15% over the last 5 years, due in part that manufacturers, because of ASR programs, Automatic Stock Replenishment, just to break that acronym down, manufacturers offer very little in the way of return allowance and the ability to get rid of idle inventory and give it back to the manufacturer. The manufacturer, bottom line, doesn't want the part back. Once it leaves the door, it's gone. And you get a small smidgen of return allowance if you hit all your incentives to send it back. In most instances now, manufacturers don't want it, so you have to learn how to build accruals or whatnot to get rid of obsolescence. But that's the real hang up in dealerships now, is facing that reality, facing that fact, and starting to come up with methods to make sure that you have enough to retire the obsolescence, and looking at best practices. Going back to what's the core issue? Is it technicians over ordering? Are you big in wholesale and getting too much back? Those types of things, trying to control it and charge restocking fees or whatnot to make sure you're earning enough accrual to retire that frozen capital that more than likely has been frozen ever since it showed up and didn't get fulfilled. That's the critical thing.
That's very critical. And I think a lot of times I hear from dealers or just how much they're throwing away. We just had this conversation. And I think that from your perspective, should dealerships be throwing away hundreds of thousands of dollars of obsolescence? At what point should they be like, okay, this is standard practice, we're throwing this much away, we're writing it off or whatever? Because I think the whole thing is dealerships are going to have some sort of obsolescence. I guess my question is, at what point is it a problem? And I know our goal is, to achieve zero with our dealers, but that's a lot of collaboration and work on both parties.
Well, yeah, I'll give a great analysis of something I learned a long time ago. When I would go out and do workshops and webinars, there was a gentleman by the name of Art Neiman, and Art was an HR person. Okay, so what's that got to do with inventory? A lot. And when I explain it, it'll make sense. One of the things I remember that Art said, and it's one of those things that have stuck with me, it's in my head forever. Art said he did a seminar on when was the best time to fire an employee. And he came back and said, before you ever hire them. From an inventory perspective, what's the best way to combat obsolescence? Is making sure up front what is ordered is needed. And a lot of times that, the parts department, and I've been bringing this up a few times since I did it a year ago at a parts seminar. I was at a fixed ops seminar and I was talking to a group of parts managers, and a bunch of service managers were there. And I gave them my 4 stock speech, which I just talked about, over ordering by text and whatnot. And this parts managers all stopped me and said, can you take that speech and go next door and talk to the service managers? Because parts and service, a lot of times, the service department doesn't realize they're shooting their own parts operation in the foot by overstocking it with useless parts. Let's face it, this is one question I've had asked of me, and I've always stuck to this because it's so true. Let's say that set of floor mats that I talked about with the months no sale versus months no receipt, but you have a set of floor mats, you order it, comes in, wrong color, or whatever, now you're stuck with it, you put it on the shelf. The question is, when should you treat that as obsolescence? Do you treat it at 13 months? No, you treat it right away. Make it really easy for these low-selling, low-gross parts to get out of your inventory. You're stuck with it, you might as well keep it for the time being, but to classify frozen capital to me, if it didn't meet the phase-in criteria, if it isn't part of the ASR program, and you have it on your shelf, that part is frozen capital today.